HAB, harmful algae blooms and what makes them occur. HAB, Lake Champlain, Lake George, Lake Erie, all the Great Lakes, Lake Gaston, Falls Lake, Moosehead Lake in Maine. Let's see, all over this country, from Texas to Washington State, all along Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida, Lake Okeechobee. Lake Okeechobee, there's a good one for the Kristen Wild of the Education Department of the Lake George Association. You know, they got their little pinkies out in the air there at the Lake George Association. Let's take a real good look at the vast, massive, unbelievable poisoning of America's lakes from sewage. Now, for Kristen Wild and David Wick, 6,000 septic tanks in the Lake George Basin are dumping leachate into the lake. Leachate. You can call it nitrate and phosphate contamination all you want to. Leachate's full of nitrate and phosphate. And let's see, when you drive across the east side of Lake George on Route 9L during, soggy kind of wet weather, the smell of sewage is in the air like it's raunchy. It's freaking nasty. David Wick. Ask anybody that drives 9L during, rainy season there, and ask them about the smell of sewage that you can smell from, Bloody Pond Road all the way to Pilot Knob. Cleverdale, Rockhurst, Assembly Point, Dunham's Bay, all along there by Paulus Fathers and Weowaka. The entire east side of Lake George smells of sewage in wet weather. David Wick. Now, to the governor of the state, Mr. Cuomo, and to the director of the Department of Environmental Confiscation there, old Basil Sagos, this joke on Lake George is, Kristen Wild doesn't think it's a joke. Oh, we got a lot of work to do. And Tom West and Kathy Bozzoni and Chris Novinsky and John Stroh and Dan Steck and the Warren County Board of Supervisors and the Queensbury Town of Supervisors and Essex County and Washington County and Bolton Landing and, the entire Nexium sex cult, what do they call that there? Hewlett's Landing. Let's see. Nexium sex cult, Hewlett's Landing. And I'll bet you the bars and taverns in good old Lake George Village was a feeding ground for that sex cult. How much you want to bet, Jimmy LaFar? You want to talk about Log Bay Day, Jimmy LaFar? Let's talk about the Nexium sex cult and where they were trolling for bait. Yeah, exactly, Jimmy LaFar. But in any event, let's get back to the massive leaching of leachate from 6,000 septic tanks into Lake George. Kristen Wild, I want you to tell the world how many times the state of New York and International Paper Corporation have flushed Lake George using Dam 230. I want a grand total of the numbers of times that the Lake George Park Commission has engaged in environmentally flushing Lake George. Let's get right down to brass tacks, David Wick and Roger Smith. The drawdowns of the lake, those big drawdowns you engage in, how much calculation is given to the dilution of the pollution and the dilution in Lake George? Flushing all that leachate, that sewage leachate over to Lake Champlain via the Poop Chute River. Now, these questions are associated with the Freedom of Information law demand on DEC, on Lake George Park Commission, and of course on the nonprofit Fund for Lake George and the Lake George Association. All your records, your emails, your correspondence, your charts, your photographs, everything associated with lake drawdown and diluting the leachate contamination of Lake George is herein demanded. Oh my God, imagine that. You draw down the commode when you flush the toilet, David Wick. You draw down the urinal when you flush the urinal, Basil Sagos. And Christian Wild, I grew up on Assembly Point too, and chasing those algae blooms around. Just because you can't see the algae blooms doesn't mean that Lake George isn't massively contaminated with leachate from 6,000 leaking septic systems that have nowhere to go but down the bedrock in the lake basin. The bedrock in the lake basin. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it right there. All the information and the details you need are below, and start demanding answers and ask hard questions of your government there in the Lake George basin. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave it right there.